Oh my god. Go grab Dad.
We are talking Frogman, directed by Anthony Cousins, and this is a found footage movie from 2023. So this is based on a kind of cryptid that is a bit like kind of Bigfoot. This kind of particular kind of cryptid is located in Loveland in Ohio, I suppose, and we see plenty of kind of paraphernalia and stuff about this kind of local legend in this movie. Now, the story effectively starts in 1999, where we see a family on vacation, we assume in Loveland, and a couple of kids have got their video camera, and the boy manages to capture by accident some footage of this famed legend, this cryptid, the Frogman, and you know, he tries to kind of ultimately you know, put it out to the world, but is kind of like deemed a fraud. Cut to modern times, this guy is now an adult, but still has always kind of had this in the back of his mind. So he gets a couple of friends together and decides he's going to try and, you know, clear his name and prove once to all the naysayers that the Frogman he saw was actually kind of real, and to prove it once and for all. So him and a couple of friends go to Loveland to try and prove the existence of the Frogman. And when we're there, we see this, it's kind of turned into this kind of local celebrity, so to speak, and there's lots of kind of paraphernalia and merchandise and things like this, very much like Bigfoot. And it's a little bit of a joke to most people there, but there are rumours that it could be something going on. And our three intrepid protagonists, they're interviewing loads of people, you know, going out into the woods, looking at clues, and ultimately maybe coming across this Frogman who may well be real, but also have both telepathic powers, and also may be supported by cultists who kind of worship it. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss Frogman. Now, this is a movie that I would say very much follows the found footage formula. And I would say what I mean by that is it's typical of found footage movies that came out in 2005 to 2010. And what I mean by that is it's not particularly breaking any molds, and it does things that are typical of movies within that period of time. I think more modern found footage movies have found ways to kind of somewhat subvert the genre, not all the time, but this one very much is in many ways a typical found footage movie. I'm going to come on to that again. But what I am going to say that I did like about this movie, first of all, is our relationship between our three protagonists. I actually thought they did a good job, for the most part, with one exception, which I'll come on to, of really making our three friends seem like friends. I think they have a great relationship. I especially liked our female member of the group, who seems kind of very like proactive and getting in there with the guys and giving as good as she gets, but really kind of not being like a damsel in distress or kind of like nasty. She's just kind of there having just as much fun, just joking and stuff with the guys. So I just really like their relationship. It just seems like they're actually acting like genuine friends. And that, to me, you know, it gives that air of authenticity for their setup for the story. And that brings me into my next point, which is this is somewhat comedic in places. It is not a horror comedy like, for example, Deadstream, which was a found footage horror comedy, but it has some comedic moments which I actually think work pretty well. It does have dramatic sequences, and it does kind of go creepy as much as you can with a kind of a giant frog monster, but it has a lighter touch in places. And I think without kind of going too far and going more broadly into an actual comedy, it still is quite amusing and having some quite funny kind of lines and effectively dialogue, you know, conversational jokes between our kind of three sort of characters and dealing with kind of like wacky kind of individuals when they're interviewing. So I kind of quite liked it. Now the VFX, you're dealing with a giant frog, and we do see, you know, a giant frog on screen a couple of times. And when we do see it on screen, it looks fairly good, albeit we don't see it a lot. So just bear that in mind. And I'm going to touch on that. But the bits we do see, I kind of quite liked. It kind of looks alright. And I quite like the fact that it has a reasonable amount of mythology. And what does add to this kind of movie is the kind of the fact that, you know, everyone's kind of like aware of this kind of thing, or at least the legend of it. So it's not as if they're kind of going in looking for something which no one has ever heard of. The whole town has kind of heard of this kind of thing. And it has some extra elements in the fact that we do have this kind of, this cultist kind of B storyline as well. So there's multiple kind of threats, which I sort of quite liked. But the acting was solid. You know, as I've mentioned, I quite like the kind of the way the characters are depicted. But the acting goes great hand in hand with that. And you know, if you are a fan of the found footage genre, which I know many people are, I think you'll be satisfied with this, because it does kind of, as I say, very much follow the Blair Witch kind of template of movies. And that leads me into maybe what doesn't work. It very much follows the Blair Witch template of movies. So, what I was kind of alluding to earlier, this movie just does feel like it's following the template set by you know, the Blair Witch. We go to this kind of small town, we're interviewing the locals, you know, we're kind of wandering around the forest, not really kind of finding very much at all. And then ultimately, towards the end of the movie, we find sort of too much and our cast are sort of in danger. So, it's not exactly original in the way that it tells the story. The next thing I would say, which kind of, again, this feels more like a found footage of yesteryear to a degree, is that we really see only fleeting glimpses of anything on screen. And I feel this is one of the overriding kind of negative points that people say with found footage, that you don't see anything. And that is true of this movie as well. You get fleeting moments of things on screen here and there. You never really get a protracted look at anything, especially. Which is a shame, because I do feel, you know, the VFX in regards to that look alright. I mean, maybe they just didn't want to kind of like have a long shot to kind of like, so people could dissect it a little bit more. Dissect the frog, unintentional pun, but there you go. But I think they could have done it a little bit more and given people a little bit more bang for their buck in regards to that, because I just feel it just might give you blue balls to a certain degree. It doesn't really show you a huge amount of that. My next issue is, for some reason, they've chosen to do this found footage in story with a really old video camera. So when they do use phones in a couple of instances, so you'll see like a kind of ratio change and things like that. But for the most part, our main protagonist is using an old video camera, and as such, the picture quality is quite poor. Again, I'm suspecting this might be because, you know, it's not got the you know, realistic. They kind of want to hide the VFX, but you're watching like quite kind of poor footage in some aspects, and we get a lot of interference, kind of like, you know, and stuff when the kind of the actual kind of, you know, we see something on screen, the creature or something like that. You'll get a lot of kind of like, you know, artifacts and stuff in the way. And again, it's one of these things that people generally complain about with found footage, is whenever there's something on screen, you'll get a load of distortion, things like that, and it kind of, you know, it's always there. It's never like a boring scene. And this movie does that. And then speaking of the actual the found footage conceit here, there's an element in the movie. Now, the very final scene might explain this away, right? But if you're looking at, I understand the concept of the movie, right? But without kind of spoiling it, there's an element here where we are led to believe our frogman has telepathic kind of abilities, and he's messing with the mind of our female member of the group. And how it demonstrates that is it kind of like has lots of flashes of sequences that were filmed before. And I'm thinking, how has it done that, considering this is a found footage movie? Because it doesn't make sense. You're like, the movie is meant to present to us the experience of this girl's getting kind of all these mental images and it's confused and stuff, which is fine if it's a traditionally shot movie, but as a found footage movie, it doesn't make any sense. Now there is a scene at the end which you could argue that maybe explains it, but the movie, even with that in mind, the movie is still displayed as a found footage movie. So even with that very final scene, without spoilers, I still don't think it works in the context of the actual film that it's presented as, although there may be an argument for that. And then the last thing I would say is, as I've alluded to, I think our group of friends seem very tight. They seem like realistic friends, and they seem very kind of like a good group of people that get on well without too much kind of drama. And then there's a sequence in the movie where one of our friends is in trouble, and again, I'm not going to spoil it for you, and ultimately is taken off the board, shall we say. And our other two friends, the way they react to that, I just didn't think it was conducive to the fact that we're meant to believe these people are very, very close friends. And from what we've seen previous to this, the movie would indicate as such, but they just don't seem that bothered, is without kind of spoiling anything for you. So overall, I think the main downfall of this movie is, to be honest, is actually its technical presentation. Had that been a little better, I mean, just film it on phones. That's what people will film it on these days. And I suspect it's because they're trying to hide the VFX, but it doesn't make sense in context of this story and the time when this is going to be taking place. And it's the frustrating feeling that I think people will get from watching like the early found footage movies that kind of came out after the Blair Witch to try and aid that, and always kind of did the same thing. I would still say though, I kind of liked our acting, I liked the character work. What we did see in the kind of creature, I thought it was fun. It built up a good mythology, and I think it added some elements, like kind of the cult kind of elements and that sort of stuff, and then kind of the town being so overt with it, that I kind of liked. So I will actually give this movie an above average score of 6 out of 10, but it's let down by some decisions, possibly to try and hide the budget, but it is what it is. It's a 6 out of 10 for me, still worth watching if you like found footage. It's not going to kind of break the mould in any way, but it's kind of a solid movie if you don't mind some of the kind of the low production presentation, at least, of this film. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me comments and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.